there, yoga lovers. Welcome to Talk Yoga to Me. We're thrilled to have you with us as we dive into all things yoga. Whether you're on the mat, in your car, or just relaxing at home, we're here to chat about poses, philosophy, teaching tips, and so much more. So go ahead, roll out your mat, take a deep breath, and let's get started. Talk yoga to me.
I would love to. On today's episode, we are talking about new year, new practices, and a little bit about what that means for us and the ideas that we have around it. So, starting with this idea of building a ritual. Rituals are something that you can have in the morning, in the evening, throughout your day. They can also be rituals that coincide with the month, whether it's a beginning of month, end of month, beginning of year, end of year, a new moon, a full moon, so many different things to base your rituals on. Do you have any rituals that you use kind of regularly in your life?
Yeah, I definitely have a morning ritual that started out kind of cumbersome. I like to have a slow morning, but I also like to feel kind of rejuvenated and cleansed, if you will. So I start off with a ginger turmeric tea every day. And at first, when I started trying this out, I was like, peeling the ginger and the turmeric fresh every morning and chopping it up and letting it boil. Like, it was way too long of a ritual. And so I realized I had to kind of streamline that and make it more attainable and sustainable. So now, like in the summer, I make a big batch and put it in the fridge because I like it cold on our hot Florida days. But in the winter, and so I can still have it hot, I do basically little ice cubes of turmeric and ginger blended up, and I can just pop one into my teapot. I forgot what those called for it. And let it brew for a little bit, and it's ready to go. But yeah, I try and take it slow. Like, my whole thing is probably like an hour and a half, 2 hours, and yeah, I find it grounding, and also it gives me like this sense of normalcy in the morning to where like I know what to expect and I don't have to think too much about it, but it kind of allows me to slowly wake up. But yeah, what about you? Do you have a morning ritual or evening?
Yeah, I think I lean more towards morning rituals. I think you made an excellent point. They need to be sustainable and something that you can do regularly. It also is something that you do so regularly it becomes a habit and it takes the decision making out of it, right?
Yeah.
Because we've all heard of decision fatigue and we can only make so many decisions per day. It removes one of them. It's just what we do in the morning. My morning rituals are pretty simple. They usually revolve around coffee. But that said, it's a little bit more than just coffee. It is something where every morning I'm usually up first and I'm up alone, other than having a puppy that, we go outside first thing in the morning. But I wake up in the morning, I make my coffee, I sit alone in kind of quiet time, if you will, and I review my day. So I have everything that I do every day written in a paper planner because I like to try to avoid screen time as much as possible when possible. And I also think that there's just something about kind of like romanticizing your schedule on a paper planner versus always having it readily accessible in your hand. And so everything I do is on that paper. So my morning ritual only takes me maybe 20 to 30 minutes if I'm being honest. Yeah. So roll out of bed, I make my coffee, I either sit at my kitchen table or on my floor and I drink my coffee, I review my day, and then I find some type of movement. So depending on what the weather is like outside, it might be a walk, it might be a run, it might be a home workout, it might be 10 minutes on my yoga mat and little bite-sized practices and things like that. And that's pretty sustainable. I notice very quickly what my day is like if I don't do that versus what my day is like when I do that. So it's something that has always been really important to me. And one thing I've noticed is that my morning ritual tends to start the night before, where I want to make sure that I'm getting to bed on time to be up first. I want to make sure that I have coffee and that I've actually written down everything that I need to know for the week type thing. And I'm organized the night before so that in the morning I can start my day with fresh eyes
Yeah.
and kind of a new perspective on whatever I have going on that day. Yeah.
Yeah. I like morning rituals, and I mean, rituals throughout the day and even like in your practice are helpful to help you feel grounded and have like a solid foundation to start from. And also, I feel like it helps the anxiety ease because you're in a habit, and your mind and body can be like, okay, we know what to expect. There's not like this big rush in the morning for unexpected things.
Yeah.
Unexpected things are gonna happen, but like to have that little bit of ritual built into your day
Yeah.
can help ease some of that like constant nervous system activation.
Yeah, we were just talking about that too, where you mentioned you like to drink your tea cold in the summer and hot in the winter. I like mine hot all year long. And I think it clicked with me is that, you know, these hot beverages, they're really grounding for us. And sometimes when you look at how many things you have on your to-do list first thing in the morning, that can be kind of anxiety inducing. Or all of a sudden I'm time traveling in my thoughts where I'm skipping to the next thing and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't, I don't want to. And I think that hot liquid helps to bring me back down and put it into a more, like I can just see it better. I can work through my day better, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, kind of going into how we've changed our rituals a bit to like make them more sustainable, more relevant to, for me, the time of year. For you realized hot's the way to go as far as like that aspect of your ritual. But that kind of brings us to this idea of refresh and revisit. So revisiting the way that we go about our practices, our days, seeing what used to work for us and why it maybe fell off, and refreshing that, bringing that back into the now. I know on a previous episode you kind of talked about we live near the beach, but we go through these periods where we don't go to the beach.
Yeah.
So kind of like something like that, where you're bringing these grounding experiences back into your day to day. Are there any aspects of either your rituals or practices you've got going into this next year that you want to refresh or revisit?
I think that it's always a great opportunity to kind of reflect on where you've been, as we talked about in an earlier episode, and to kind of understand where you've been to know where you're going. And I think that comes into that like refreshing and revisiting, because we find things or we remember things that we maybe forgot, and things that maybe brought us joy that with other responsibilities have kind of fallen off the table. And you get to look at it and be like, why did I stop doing that? Why did I stop going to the beach 3 times a week to watch the sunset? Oh, there were responsibilities that came up. And then once those responsibilities fell off, it was like I forgot that that was something I used to do, right? And so yeah, that's something that happens that I find helpful in my personal life, is taking the time to reflect on things that bring me joy and finding ways to revisit those things or just kind of refresh. So like how we talked about stepping away from something to revisit it with fresh eyes. I think that's also applicable a lot in our yoga teaching and yoga practice. Like things that I used to love teaching that maybe I got away from, or things that I love practicing that I got away from, and I could go on and on and on about all the things I'd love to revisit. And what about you?
Yeah, I've noticed recently I was helping some of your YTT students with their upcoming midterms, which y'all got this, so that'd be great. But no, they did a great job, but it did remind me when they were kind of going through some of the content of the material, they were like, oh, what's kumbhaka and what's kriya and all these words where for a second I had hesitation. I was like, what is that? And then immediately I was like, oh, I know what that is. But you forget that you know that.
Yeah.
And you forget that you can use that. And maybe it's not in the actual yoga class, but in conversation with students who are interested in learning more about things, you can provide that information. And I mean, kubuka, you can talk about retention if you want. It's a fun word to say. So, and yeah, it made me realize too that I would like to spend more time going back through like the Heart of Yoga and the YTT material that you all provided for us, because there's so much in there that you can't process all at once. And now that I have taught for about a year, like going back through it, I'm sure there's so many things to be like, oh man, that would be so helpful for my students or for me in my practice or in my teaching. So yeah, just like revisiting and then refreshing all different aspects of our life is a really good like alliteration of ways to have new year, new practices.
Note, after we refresh and revisit things, and it kind of re-inspires us, if you will, to use things that we know or to relearn things or remember things that we forgot we knew. Sometimes that can inspire us to try new things as a teacher because we are a little bit further along in our teaching career, we have a little bit more experience, and we can be a little bit more creative with the way that we include our knowledge in classes. Do you have any experience with that?
Yeah, I think it gives you, when you're going through YTT, it's so hard because there's so much information at once and you've not even taught yet, so like until you get in the teacher seat, you don't know how to apply everything and swing it back. So I think it's really important to continue to learn and revisit those things. For me, what I found is coming back into basic root rebound cues was like really important in my first month of, I had to kind of go back and be like, okay, let's reread about cueing and how we need to start at our feet, wherever we're grounded, and then grow from there. Because I think I got so caught up in trying to apply everything I learned that I didn't know how to edit yet.
Right.
And that was where I felt like it was most important in cueing, was to have those root rebounds, because so many times it is that paired action that gets us in a quick alignment. But going forward too, I think trying new things as a teacher, you can recognize like, okay, I've been teaching for however long and I feel a little intimidated by this section, like pranayama, which for me still do. But that then gives you the information to know, once you've reflected on that, I need to revisit that. And I need to maybe take a workshop, or I need to seek even like YouTube education, whatever it may be. Rereading some of the material that you have from your original YTT or other books, so that you can then infuse that back into yoga in your practice. But I think too, going down this path, well, let's get into what new things are you trying to revisit perhaps, or
Yeah, so when I think about kind of like refreshing and revisiting, a lot of what comes up for me is like continuing education and kind of like we talked about, remembering things that we kind of forgot. So in my 300 hour, it was really fun for me to learn and dive a little deeper into things like the subtle bodies and the koshas and all of this kind of more so like energy work and how that affects our human experience, our perception versus reality, and things like that. And it was cool because it was all things I've learned before, but maybe didn't spend so much time on them or didn't hear them at the right time. So getting to hear them and refresh and revisit those concepts for me has helped to inspire new things I want to try as a teacher, as far as like theming my classes around these things, kind of like sprinkling in bite-sized, digestible concepts of perception versus reality, or energy, or what are these kosha layers, or what are these, they call them veils that kind of muddy the waters of what is real in life, which is cool. So how can I sprinkle these little themes that can seem a little woo-woo, but are also they're very real. Like when you read or learn about energy, you're like, oh, suddenly these things like make a little bit more sense. I can relate that back to something I've physically experienced. streams into my teaching is definitely something that I'd want to incorporate more of, and will be a little bit more new for me in what I've been teaching for the past couple years. I used to theme a lot. Okay. I used to theme a lot, and what would happen was I would pull these kind of like inspirations, these quotes, these things that were really meaningful to me, and I would try to paraphrase them at the end of class. It felt like an overshare, and as you guys saw previous episodes, when I overshare, I get a little emotional. So I found myself like crying at the end of class while trying to close class. And I was here like, no, I'm holding space for my students. I don't want to be crying at the end of class. I don't know what kind of experience you've had in class, and I think that my role here is to be a little bit more neutral and to hold space for you, so that if you feel like crying, you can. Or if you feel like that was woo woo and weird, you are allowed to have that. You know what I mean? And so I think that by creating little bite-sized themes and more digestible pieces, I can kind of revisit, refresh, rework that concept back into my classes in a way that doesn't alter my emotional state. To the point where I'm crying during class. And I would just get choked up. I'm sure that you remember, maybe you've been in my class, like, and it's been years since I've incorporated things at the end of class, and I would just get like choked up, and people would hear it and they'd be like, are you okay? And it's like, everything's fine. I just shared a little bit, but I'm really proud of you guys.
I do remember a couple of moments where you did, but I would say that as much as, like, we know you're holding space for us, and I don't think, at least for the way I interpret it, you getting a little bit emotional just comes across as genuine. That like,
that's sweet.
Like that it feels great that like as much as we're getting so much out of this, that you perhaps are getting a lot out of it too, feels really good as a student. That, you know, I mean, I get that you want to close strong, you know, and like, and it could be impede speaking if, you know, you're feeling a little bit emotional, but it comes across in a really sweet and like empowering way, especially as someone who doesn't cry or
That's
needs
so
to work
kind
on
of
crying.
you to say.
We want to hold space for you too. Give me your finger, like, alright, there we go.
Oh my gosh. Oh yes, I mean, oh, I had another thought on that, and it totally just left my mind. Oh, but also with like the holding space and kind of creating these themes in these classes to incorporate some of these thoughts on like energy and subtle bodies and human experience, so that when people come to class, like an asana class, they can take some of these little concepts and apply them to their own lives, and maybe start to see different things that resonate with them as well, like however small it might be, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, that can be really impactful, especially because people don't always know how to relate like the asana into how it can help them with their nervous system, or like with their energy. And outside of class, that's where, you know, if you can keep the energy kind of calming down, recognize when it's elevated, and like help bring it back down, that can be super impactful for students.
And to jump back to like rituals, that's where a lot of my like ritual motivation comes from, is like I'm always trying to manage my stress levels, I'm always trying to manage my nervous system, and to try to stay as like even and chill as possible type thing. So finding little ways to share that importance with students, because you don't know until you know. You know what I mean? Is really helpful.
Yeah.
So.
And there's so many ways to, like with yoga, we often get on this yogi path, if you will, and then we learn about, you know, offshoots from it or aspects within it that we get inspired to learn more. So I feel like that's another way to bring in new practices to the new year, and trying new things as a teacher, is noticing what like gets you interested, and what is drawing you in. Maybe it's getting more into Ayurvedic practices, or you know, even outside, if it's like Tai Chi or some other practice outside of yoga but is in health or wellness, whatever it may be, and trying to then you can just benefit your life, or it could also somehow come back into your practice with as a teacher and a student. Which for me, I feel like there's so many different things I was interested in like during the YTT, so I'm excited to try and revisit the material that we have to notice what strikes me again and kind of dive deeper into. But I know off the top of my head, like meditation is a big one where I meditation brought me into yoga, but then I feel like the asana kind of took over more of my energy in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
But I've kind of lost a bit of connection with my meditation practice and my confidence in teaching it as well. So trying to bring that into 2025. But do you find that there are inspirations, like as you've gotten into yoga, that have fed into other areas, or vice versa, even?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all start with physical. We come to our first. I'm not gonna say we all start with physical because you just told me you started with meditation. Like you literally just said it. So let's not talk in absolutes here.
A lot of people.
A lot. There is a large portion, and that's just me. But anyways, so for me personally, there we go. It started with asana, and I came to my first yoga class, and I was like, that was hard. You have to be really strong to do yoga, and it kind of inspired this like healthier side of me where I was like, oh, I'm gonna do things outside of yoga to get stronger to practice yoga. And I see it a lot in students in classes too. You know, we do our first chaturanga and people are like, I'm gonna do push-ups before I see you next so that I can be stronger.
And for me, that's something that I have as part of my practice goals for next year as a student is I really want to get my core more stabilized and active to where I can work on inversions, but also like I'm really interested in the jump throughs from like down dog into an L sit. I can do L sit to down dog, okay, but that trying to balance your weight properly and keep the core stable as you're coming forward is such a challenge to me. So yeah, I feel like in this new year, new practices, I also want to implement some things for my own self as a student, and getting stronger is definitely something that I think will help both sides in and out of yoga.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that from a student perspective, anytime you have an asana goal, it can help kind of like reignite a little joy into your practice and a little fun into your practice, because it's like you're working towards something. You're giving your asana practice a little purpose, which can be a lot of fun. I know that for me, like I want to kind of fine tune being able to do and hold pincha and maybe find some fun transitions in and out of it. Also, I tend to practice things, and once I get them, I'll move on to something else, and then I realize that I can no longer do things that I used to do because I haven't practiced them. So I love doing like a crow to a jump back chaturanga, and I was like, oh, I haven't done that in so long. I tried it and was like, oh, let me remember, type thing. So little things like that. I'd love to be able to stand up from a wheel pose or kick over or something, like little transitions. This is little transitions where I can move a little more gracefully through advanced yoga poses, if you will, without having to like lay down on the ground. That would be lovely. Because I like to practice places like at the beach is really fun. And then have you ever laid down in the sand and been like, okay, well, nothing till tomorrow. No things till tomorrow.
Trail of sand everywhere you go.
Yeah, exactly. And one of my goals for 2024, I was working towards like standing splits. It just looked like so much fun. It was gonna be something that required strength, balance, and flexibility. And I could do my seated compass pretty well. So standing compass seemed like a reasonable next step. It's so hard. But it's really fun to have and kind of curate my home practice to work towards these goals and just kind of keep that little fire alive to like try things, but you know, always being very like mindful of goals where it's something that maybe you have to pivot, maybe there's gonna be changes, maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't, and just having something that kind of leads you without holding you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, not allowing yourself to be a bit flexible if it
Yeah.
doesn't work out. Like you gotta do some different drills to get there,
Yeah,
or
things
extend
like that.
timeline. Do you have any practice goals, new practice goals as a teacher? Things you want to bring into 2025?
Yeah, I think definitely, like we talked about, I mean, adding little themes in class that are manageable for both me and my students, things like that. Finding little ways to sprinkle concepts and ideas into classes that students can take with them off the mat would be really fun. And also, I've had more and more conversations with students about wanting to know like more advanced things too. So maybe taking the time more often to spend one-on-one time with people after classes to be able to give pointers or some direction on how to achieve this or how they can make a class more advanced for their practice without having to change an all levels class.
Yeah.
So things like that are kind of the goals that I'm working towards for 2025, I think. Subject to change, add or remove. But things
Refresh
like that.
and revisit whatever you need to do. Yeah.
What about for you?
I've been leaning into more power classes with like the hot power classes, and my students seem to have been receptive to it. You know, I think I've gotten people who are like, yeah, I love that, that was a lot of fun. And some that are like, that was awful, it was so hard. But they're saying it with a smile, so I'm sure they didn't hate it too much. So I'm gonna lean into that more, and even trying to do it in a way that for the student who is like, this is their comfortable edge and they don't wanna go past it, trying to just sprinkle in options to get into more intense poses towards the peak. And I feel like that was something that I used to do in the past, whereas now, a year or so into teaching, I kind of have gotten into these are my flows, which is a good thing. Like my students know what to expect. It's grounding for them, and it gives them something to improve upon and notice differences week by week. But I want to invigorate the kind of unique or more intense poses into my classes. So yeah.
That's awesome. I love it.
Yeah. But just to kind of go back through on our new year, new practices, building a ritual is a great way to find yourself grounded, whether it be in the morning, the evening, or throughout the day. Refreshing and revisiting past knowledge, whether it be something related to yoga or not, but just rechecking back in with yourself and trying to remember those things that you might have stored way back in your brain and could be helpful for your students or your classes. Also, we are excited to be trying new things as teachers, but also kind of outside of that, finding inspiration from other practices, other types of philosophies that we can bring into our yoga classes.
Other areas in your life.
Yeah. And vice versa. Kind of having both inspire outside life and in yoga, and the other way around.
So with these new year, or with this new year and new practices, if you have practice goals that you are looking to achieve or accomplish as either a teacher or a student, we would love it if you shared it with us via comment, email, or messaging. We love connecting with you. We love hearing from you. And we're here to talk yoga. So we look forward to practicing with you again soon.